This will be the video that will step you through the textbook project for Excel Module 3. The first thing that we need to do is make sure from Mind tab that we get that start file downloaded. So we'll select it, and then once we have that downloaded, we will click our Continue button to get our expected file name. We will copy that and then we can go ahead and open up our worksheet, or our workbook, I guess. We'll do that in Able Editing. And then we want to save as our correct file name that we need to have when we submit this. Alright, so we have that renamed now, and in this module we are going to be working with what they call a larger worksheet. We will be doing some charting, and towards the end we're going to be doing some steps that show us how to work with larger worksheets by breaking your screen down into different sections. And then one of the last things we do is we learn about how to use the data that we have in our spreadsheet to do some analysis. So to get started, we'll go to A1 and we will type in our title there. We'll go down to A2, type in our subtitle. And then we will go to our page layout tab and change the theme to slice, the slice theme. We are going to go to cell B3, and this is where we are going to enter the first month of our year. So we'll put January in there, and then press your enter button up here on your formula bar, and that will enter the data that you put in cell B3, but it will also leave you in cell B3 so that you can do the next steps. So if we go up to our ribbon on our Home tab, you will see in the Alignment section, there is that dialog box launcher button. We're going to click on that. And once that opens up, it should be on the Alignment tab. And you'll see over here on the right hand side where it says Orientation, and we are going to take that. Right now it's at 0 degrees, and that's where that little red diamond is. If you click and drag that up, you will see the degrees are increasing, and they have us go to 75. Now, if you were not able to do that with your mouse, because that can be a little tricky, maybe we can get close. And then you can use these little arrows up or down if you go too far to get it exactly at the 75 degrees rotation that they want. So once you have that selected, then we can click on our OK button, and you'll see that the text January is now diagonal in B3. because we want to do projections for the other 5 months of our year, or the half year, we are going to use our fill handle. So the nice thing about using our fill handle, once we have our month entered and it formatted with the rotation, it will apply that same rotation that we put in January throughout the rest of these months that we're going to enter in. So we're going to go to cell B3, put your white plus sign on that green square, change it to the black plus sign, and then we're going to drag over until we get to G3, which should have the month of June showing. And so then you can release your mouse, and you will see that it fills that in with the months of the year. You will also see that this auto fill options button shows up, and you will also, all right, let me undo that because I'll try again. Okay, so in your autofill options button, you will see that the fill series is what is set by default. You can also just copy the cell, which would put January in all of them. You can fill that has the formatting only, or fill without formatting, or you can fill the months. So we want it to be set to the fill series, and when it does that, it takes the formatting with it, obviously. You can either click on your autofill options button, or you can press your escape key. It should take that away, but it's not, so that's okay. We'll go to H3 and we're going to type the word total in there. And then when we press our tab key or our right arrow key, we'll go over to I3, and this is where we'll type our word chart in. Now, you notice as you press your enter key or your right arrow key that the two last cells that we entered, total and chart, that data is now at that same 75-degree angle because it is following the same pattern that we did already in this row. So in your textbook now, it gives you some additional information about the autofill options menu. And you will need to be familiar with this. I can't remember right now if you do some of this in the homework project, and maybe we'll do some a little bit later on too. Sorry, with this new textbook, I just can't keep track of what I've done previously and what I'm doing this semester. So, but I know you'll probably see that fill stuff again. Okay, so to increase our column widths, what we're going to do is we want to move our boundary that is between column A and B so that the width is 38.5. So we've not done this. So I don't think we've set these to be a specific number yet. So when I click on my boundary there between A and B, you'll see that it says that it's at 8.38 width, and so I just need to keep dragging that over until it reaches 38.5. Now, if that is a struggle, and it is for me because I don't have my mouse and I'm having to use the little keypad or the little mouse pad thing right now, so I'm close to 38. Now, what you can do, and this is what I would do because it's a lot easier for me, if you right-click on the heading for column A, because that's what we're adjusting, you will see that you have the option for column width down here in your little shortcut menu. And when that pops up, you can type specifically in the width that you want it. So I would just type in 38.5, click my OK, and then it's going to adjust that to the exact size that I want it to be. Now we're going to select columns B through G, and they want all of these set to 15. So again, you can click and drag and try to get exactly on the 15. And if, oh look, I did it. But if you play with it enough and you get tired of it, you can still go up in here to one of the letters and do your column width and then set that to 15 there as well. And that will adjust all columns B through G all at the same time. We are going to set column H to 18 point width. And I don't think we do anything with the chart in column I. So now we're ready to enter our row titles, and we're also going to be doing some indenting of row titles. And I will just tell you right now that sometimes I forget to do the indentation, so just make sure you're following along with your textbook and do all of those steps that you are supposed to do. So we're going to go to A4, and we are going to type the word revenue. Then you can just press your enter key and we'll go down to A5. Now I'm going to tell you right now that these two get counted off a lot because kids don't type the words correctly. So make sure that you type revenue correctly and make sure you type cost, that's singular, cost of goods. Goods is plural, it has that S on the end of it, and then the word sold. I get that a lot, that there's misspellings there, and then you get it all counted off. So then in A6, we're going to type in the words gross margin. We can go down to A8, and this is where we'll start with our expenses. Our first expense is a bonus. Then we have our salary, site rental, marketing, miscellaneous. Then we have our total expenses in A14. Now that is plural also, expenses. And then we're going to skip A15. We'll go down to A16 and we're going to put in our operating income. We're going to go back up to cell A5. A5 is our cost of goods sold, and we need this row to be indented. So to do that, we'll have A5 selected, and then in our alignment section, we have our decrease indent and our increase indent. And somehow I just made that angled that I didn't want. So we want to increase our indent or move it to the right. So we'll click that button one time. And then we're going to come down and select all of our expenses. So we're going to start in A9, and then we're going to go down through A13. So these are our expenses, and we're going to indent those too. So we'll click that indent button. So the word expenses and the word total expenses are not part of the categories of expenses that we have. So we are not indenting those. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to copy a range of cells from what we have set up here in our worksheet to another location in our worksheet. So remember that as we are copying and pasting, what we have selected here is our source, and the location we're going to is our destination. So what we want to have selected is what we just selected for the indent, the different expenses. So if that's still selected, you can come up here to your clipboard and you can do copy. You can right click inside the selected area and choose copy. Or while it is selected, you can put your mouse on the edge where you see a four-headed arrow, and then when you start to click and drag, if you hold your control key down, you will see that right next to the arrow now is a small plus sign. That lets you know that what you're doing is copying the information. So we're going to paste this into cell A19. So however you choose to copy and paste, maybe it's 18 that we want to go to. Hold on just a second here. Nope, it is 19. We are good. Okay. So we're going to go back to A18. And what we're going to type in here is the description of this area of our worksheet. So this is going to be called the what hyphen if assumptions. Okay, if you're following along in your textbook, I got those two steps reversed. So we were supposed to type what if assumptions first and then do the copy and paste. But regardless, we got them both done. So the next part of your textbook does give you some little additional information on using pasting and some of the different paste options that you get when you see that paste options button show up. Also talks about using the drag and drop to move or copy cells, and I just showed you that by copying them. We held down the control key. You can click and drag, and that will just move as well if you don't hold the control key down. Okay, it also talks about cutting cells. We're not going to do that, but if you cut cells, it will remove them from your spreadsheet. And then it will also ask you, do you want to move cells to the left or to the right or up or down, which is the next part of your textbook. It talks about inserting and deleting cells in a worksheet. And I always recommend to students that you don't ever insert or delete individual cells, because that can just mess up your entire worksheet, especially if you have some functions or formulas put in. So I always tell students, if they are needing an additional row or column of information, to enter an entire row or an entire column, and that way it'll help keep everything lined up in your worksheet for you. We're going to go to row 20 in our spreadsheet here, and we want to select the actual number 20, or be on the number 20, and then we want to choose, we want to do a right click. When we see a right click, you'll get a shortcut menu here, and we want to choose the insert option from here. And that's going to automatically put in a row between row 19 and 20. So what was in 20, everything else below it has now moved down. So 20 is an empty cell, and this is where we're going to add another part of our what if assumption, which is sales revenue for bonus. Now we're going to go to row 19, and we want to click the heading for row 19, and we're also going to choose insert, and so it will put a row, okay, so we have our insert options button that popped up here, and so we want to format this the same as below. So we're going to choose format same as below, and so that way everything that we format is staying the same as what we had copied and put down there. All right, we're going to go to cell A19, and we're going to type the word margin, and then they have you save your workbook, but we just did that, so if you don't want to, you don't have to. And they do give you a different file name to save it when you're working through your textbook. You don't want that one, you want the one that we get from Cengage. The next part of your textbook talks about inserting columns, inserting multiple rows, dragging ranges, so lots of information there that you're going to need to read through about inserting columns. Then it talks about inserting a single cell versus a range of cells. I've kind of talked a little bit about that already. And then on the reverse of that is deleting columns, cells, rows of information. We are in section 3-4E, to enter numbers with format symbols. Now, most of the time when we have been doing data entry for our spreadsheets, we are doing them with just the numeric values. There's no formatting, there's no commas, there's no decimal places, no dollar signs, none of that, no percent signs. So what we're going to do here in our what if assumption section is we are going to type in the numbers that we want to use there. But in addition to the numbers, we're going to be putting formatting symbols with them. Now the reason that we're doing that is because down the road, when we use this section to make some changes to our spreadsheet, we are going to want if we have a percent in our cell, when we change it to another number, we want it to remain a percent. We don't want to have to start over and then rename or reapply a format later on. So we're just going to do it as we type this information in. So there's a table there that gives you some information about what what entering formatted numbers is going to look like. So we are going to go to B19. B19 is where our margin information is going to be. So our margin is going to be 81.25%. So we need to type the 2 decimal places and we need to type the percent sign. You can press your enter key or your enter button, but we're going to move down to cell B20, and this is going to be 5,000. Now we also want to include the 2 decimal places. Okay. So our sales revenue for bonus is going to be $1,250,000. Now, they don't have us use dollar signs there. I did something wrong because that was not. Okay. 1,250,000.00. Okay, I put in, I think, O's instead of zeros. But you do want to put the commas in. You want to put the decimal places in. That way, whenever numbers change, they're already formatted the way they need to be. Okay, so salary is in B22, and we are going to put 20%, 20.00, and our percent sign. Then our site rental is 10%, 10.00, percent sign. And then in B24, our marketing is 3.50%, and the miscellaneous is 5%, 5.00 with our percent sign. Okay. Part of the reason that we format these numbers also is that when we start using them in our spreadsheet, it will be helpful that they know what the formatting is. If it's needed to be put in as a percent, if it's needed to be put in as a dollar value. We're going to go back up to row 3. And if you can't see it, you may have to scroll back up there. Row 4. Row 3 is where we have our months of the year. Row 4 is where we're going to enter our revenue. Now, our revenue is given to us for a financial projection based on history of what we have done in those months in previous years. So, in B4, we are going to type 1,470,500.00. Now, we have these numbers that we're going to have to fill in for the rest of this row, and they are all going to have decimal places. They are all going to have commas. If I can get them typed in here. That is not right. I have too many numbers in there. Let's see if that looks better. Yes, 1,186, 600. Okay, so for April, which is E4, one comma 498 comma 000 decimal place 00. 1 comma 102 comma 900 and your 2 decimal places. And then for June, 1 comma 145 comma 300 and then your 2 decimal places. Now that we're in cell H4 and we have all of our projected revenue put in for each of the months, we are going to do a sum of this row. So while we are in H4, we can come up here to the auto sum button. And if you click that button twice, it's automatically going to add up the numbers that it thinks you want to add up. So in this case, it is adding the sum of B4 through G4. So it is adding up all of these numbers, even though not all of them are listed. It's going to add up all of these since it is to the left of where we did our sum function. Okay, now here is where you will want to look at your textbook and make sure that your number matches up, because if it doesn't match up here at the very beginning, then you're going to have a nightmare as you start doing data entry and getting all kinds of funky numbers. So we should have $7,808,300.00. And I don't know if you noticed that I did the double click there when I did that total. You can do either one. You can click your auto sum button once. It shows you what it's going to use as the sum function. And then you can click it a second time. Or you can just from the get-go, if you know maybe if you know Excel is going to pick exactly the numbers that you want to add, like in this case, you can just go up and when you have your auto sum, just do a double click right there and it'll add it up and put it in that cell for you right away. This next little section in your textbook shows you how to enter what's called the system date. What we're actually going to do is put in what's called a now function. A now function is a date and time function, and when you use the now function, it puts in the current date and time if you have it formatted that way. So when we put our now function in for this particular worksheet, every time that you open up that worksheet, it is going to have the current date on it. So to use our now function, what we're going to do is we're going to go to cell H1. So let me come up here to H1. Okay, so now that we're in H1, they have us come here and click on the Insert Function button on our ribbon. And then if you want to, you can change this to date and time, because that's where you know you'll find it since you're putting in a date. And then as we go down through the list of functions here, we're looking for one that starts with now, the word now. So we will scroll down until we get to the ends, and we'll find the now function. And so it'll show you that it returns a current date and time formatted as date and then a time. So we'll click the OK button here, and then you'll see the now function show up. It's just entered for you, and then you can just click the OK button, and then it tells you your date and time. All right, in your textbook there, the next part just talks to you about different formatting that you can use for your dates. We are going to so we're going to go between column H and I, and then we're going to double click between H and I, and that will adjust the column width to the best fit. This next section in our textbook is one of the more difficult concepts for some students to pick up on. And I always tell students that it is best if you read through this part of your textbook, because sometimes reading how the author writes the information makes much more sense than how I explain it. And part of that is just like some of you guys have found in the wording of the instructions for your either textbook project or your homework project. Some of us read things differently. Some of us understand things differently, just how they're worded and such. So if it's not making any sense how I go through and explain this, then please make sure you read in the textbook on absolute referencing, and maybe that will make a little bit more sense to you. So in modules 1 and 2, we created a formula. We did the hours worked times the hourly pay rate, and we got the results. So once we had that formula entered, though, then we used that fill handle and we copied that formula along with all the other ones down the column and into different rows. Now, as the formula changed from row 4 to row 5 to row 6, the actual formula for each specific cell changed by Excel automatically changing the row reference. And that is what is called relative referencing. And I think I mentioned that a couple of times in the previous modules, but just in case you don't remember hearing that, that's what's called relative cell referencing or relative referencing. The formula the formula that is put in on the very first row is adjusted automatically by Excel, and it is relative to the new row that it goes to. And it could also be to the new column. If you're taking, I think in Module 1, we took information that was in column B or C or something, and we copied it across the other columns. So the column letters changed for that particular project that we were working on. So you can have column letters change, row numbers change automatically. Excel adjusts them to the cell reference that it needs to be. That's called relative cell referencing. Now, we are going to learn about absolute cell referencing here in this module. Absolute cell referencing is whenever you use a cell address that needs to always be referred to as that specific cell address in doing the calculation that you're doing. So I always like to tell people that you absolutely have to go to that cell to get the data to do the formula correctly. So it's an absolute cell reference. Now, to create an absolute cell reference, we cannot just put in the letter of the column and the number of the row. We have to give additional information when we are required to have an absolute cell reference. So what we use in Excel is a $sign. We put a $sign before the letter and a $sign before the row reference. So in your textbook, the example they give is B4. So if B4 needs to be an absolute cell reference, it would be $sign B, $4. Now, the nice thing about this is that we have a key on our keyboard that can help us do that, so that we are not always having to hit our shift key to make the $signs. So there's more in your textbook about absolute versus relative cell referencing. It also talks in there about mixed cell referencing. Mixed cell referencing lets you include a $sign before the column but not the row, or vice versa. And so it also gives you a table with some examples there that shows you when those all might be good used for a specific situation. So as we get ready to put in the rest of our data, we're going to be putting in some formulas and some functions, or I guess mainly formulas. We are going to be basing all of this off of our revenue from that row 4. We are also going to be multiplying, dividing, subtracting, and mostly multiplying, times our data in our what if assumptions down here, our percents and our dollar values and things like that. So, because we are working with a financial projection, the terms that we're going to be using here, the cost of goods sold, the gross margin, operating income, those are words that if you've taken an accounting class may be familiar to you. If you've not ever had an accounting class or any type of finance stuff, those may be words that you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to mess with this. This is not what I'm going to school for. Okay. In your textbook, it does try to give you some explanation as to what you're doing with a specific formula and why you're doing it. I'm not as concerned about you understanding the why you're doing it when you're working with cost of goods sold and gross margin and operating income and things like that. It will make it easier for you if you can grasp that understanding, but I'm more concerned about you knowing the difference between absolute and relative cell referencing. We're going to learn here in just a little bit how to do an if function. So I'm more concerned about you being able to do that. In your textbook, they give you an explanation, and they usually do this in the homework parts too. They say, do this, do this, do this. But then at the very end of the instructions, it will say, it will have an equal sign, and then it will start giving you cell references. When you see that equal sign that's at the very end, that is the formula that you're wanting to use. So in table 3-7, they do give you how to figure the cost of goods sold. And the cost of goods sold is found by taking the revenue, which we find in row 4, so in this case B4, times 1 minus the margin percent. So it would be written as 1 minus the 81.25%. So you have to do the 1 minus the margin percent first. Whatever that number is, then is multiplied times the revenue amount. I probably lost a whole bunch of you there, okay? Again, don't be too concerned about understanding how that calculation is made. What I need you to be okay with doing is knowing how to type that formula in. And they give you that information. In that table 3-7, the last column on the right gives you all of the formulas that you will be using to put in here. So we're going to go to B5, and this is where I just told you what that formula was that we're going to put in there. So we're going to start with equals, and then we want to multiply, or we want to start by having our revenue, and then we're going to multiply it, so we'll use the asterisk. We'll have an open parenthesis because we want to do this subtraction first. 1 minus B19. And you'll notice that B19 here on my screen shows up in red, and it kind of highlights it down here for you. But B19 has to have the absolute value dollar signs put in. And you are able to use your F4 key that's up at the top of your keyboard. If you press it one time, it will automatically put a dollar sign in front of the B and in front of the 19. So then we can do a close parentheses. Okay, I'm going to just come up here and click on this enter button. And I'm going to use my fill handle real quick. Just want to show you what this is going to look like. So, this is, let me click on the right cell here, B4 times 1 minus B19. Okay? Okay. So, you'll see, you can't see row 4 because my monitor is weird, but you can see the blue highlight there. So it's B4 and then here's B19. Because I have the absolute cell reference to B19, when I click over here onto C5, notice how my formula changes. I'm multiplying C4 because that does not have an absolute cell reference to it. So it changed from B4 to C4. But what I'm multiplying by to get the cost of goods sold, which is 1 minus the margin, that stayed the same because I have the dollar signs with the B19. Again, over here it changed from some C4 to D4, but the B19 stayed the same. Okay, so I'm going to undo that fill of those two formulas that I did. I filled over there. So I'm going to come back up here to my formula, and I'm going to press my F4 key a couple more times, and it just goes through the loop there. So if you press it once, you get $ sign in front of the B and in front of the 19. So that is your absolute cell reference to B19. If you press the F4 key a second time, then you get one of those mixed references. So in this case, column B would adjust as you move it from B to C to D, but cell cell B19 would remain the same. Row 19 would remain the same. B is a relative reference. 19 is an absolute reference. If I press it one more time, it's just going to reverse those. So now B is the absolute, 19 is a relative. Press it one more time, and you're back to your fully relative cell reference. Again, don't worry about doing mixed reference stuff, but just know that that's what it is when you go through that. So I wanted to change this back to a relative cell reference. And then if I copy this or use my fill handle to move this over here, notice that my numbers are quite a bit different. Okay, so this is B4 times 1 minus B19. Okay, so if I use my rangefinder here, then I have my revenue, which is C4, times 1 minus C19. So what's in C19? Nothing. So 1 minus nothing is 1. And C4 times 1 is the same thing that you have in C4. That is because that's multiplying it times C19. And this is multiplying it times D19. So that is why you have to have the dollar sign to put in both the for the column, letter, and the row number. So you must have the absolute cell references in this part as we go through and do the rest of the formulas for this. Also, as you go through and put these in, check your numbers, make sure that they're matching up with what is in the textbook. All right, if we go down to B6, the nice thing about this, guys, is we're only going to fill this information in column B, and then we're going to be able to use our fill handle to fill it all the way across. So to get our gross margin, we are going to have to do a subtraction. We need to subtract the cost of goods sold from our revenue. And to do that, it is one of those subtractions that the way that it's always written in text makes it a little more difficult to create that. But what I need you to remember is simple math. Whenever you learn to subtract in elementary school, you had the larger number at the top, what you were subtracting, the lower number typically below, and then you just did your subtraction. So it's going to be the same thing. If you wrote this out in longhand, you would have the data that's in B6 on the top, and then you would have your subtraction sign, and then you would have B5. And then you would draw your line to do that actual subtraction. So it's going to be the same thing here. We have to start with the equals, and then we're going to do B4 minus B5. And we don't need an absolute cell reference to any of those because that is going to adjust as we go across the rest of that row. Okay, so remember to double check your numbers as you do this subtraction here. So we should have $1,194,781.25. So if we got that, then we're good. And we are going to move on to figure the rest of our expenses. The first expense that we are going to figure is our bonus. If we look down at our assumptions table, our what if assumptions area, you will notice that our bonus is $5,000. But how do we know if they earn a bonus? Well, if we look right below there, the sales revenue for a bonus is $1,250,000. So if the sales revenue is more than $1,250,000, then they earn a bonus of $5,000. So instead of having to look and compare, is this one more, is this one more, is this one more, is this one more, we can create a function that will have Excel determine that information for us. This is called an if function. An if function, the easiest way to think about the if function is that it has three parts to it. So the first part is what we call the logical test. And so in this case it would be if B4, which is where our sales revenue is greater than or equal to our sales revenue for bonus amount, which is $1,250,000. That's our logical statement. Is B4 greater than B21? If that is the case, so we have the logical statement, if that is the case, then the result in this problem would be a bonus of $5,000. If that is not the case, if it is a false statement, then the result that goes into this particular cell would be a 0 because they don't earn any bonus. So the logical step, or the logical test, the value of true, the value of false. That is the 3 things that you need to remember about an if function when you're writing an if statement or an if function. Again, your textbook probably explains this for some of you way better than my brief explanation of a logical test, value of true, value of false. So in your textbook, it also plugs in the actual values that you would have to type in to get that, which we're going to look at here real quickly. So we're going to go into B9, and we need to determine if the company has received a bonus for their revenue in January. The easiest way to work with an if function is by using the insert function button up here to go into your insert function dialog box. And if you don't have the most recently used, again, you remember you can go into some of the different categories there. But if I go to the most recently used, you'll see the if function there. And so I can click the OK button. And this steps me through completing those 3 parts of the if function that I need. So my logical test would be, and because I'm using the insert function dialog box, I don't have to type in equals if, all that, open and close parentheses and all that. All I have to type in here is, and I don't even have to type, I can click, B4 greater than or equal to B21. But remember, anything that's in that assumptions table down there is going to have the absolute value put with it. So we would then need to push our F4 button. So we press our F4 button, it puts those dollar signs in for us. Now, the other thing I like about using the insert function dialog box option here is it tells me right here in my logical test that this is a true statement. So now all I have to do is type in the value of true will be what is in cell B20. Now again, we're pulling stuff from our assumptions table down there. Because we're doing that, we have to set the B20 to have that absolute cell reference or absolute value by using the dollar signs. So the results of that would be that $5,000 is going to show up in cell B9. Now, the value of false, and the reason that we're having to set the value of false is because we're going to use this for the entire 6 months. So we're going to fill this across. So our value of false is they're not going to get a bonus. It'll just say 0. So again, here are the results of that. If it was a false value, this is what would be returned. But here it tells you our formula results is 5,000 because they did reach that revenue that they needed to earn their bonus. So we'll click the OK button, and you will see that the $5,000 bonus does show up. We're going to go ahead and put the remaining formulas in. And as you're following through with your textbook, I don't know if it's just the way that my brain works or what, but typically, well, and it may not be that way, they tell you what to type in and then they tell you what cell to go to. But maybe this is going to be different with this one because it says select B10. And so then in B10, I'm going to type equals B4, which is my sales revenue. Like I said, most everything's going to be based off of the sales revenue that we get. And then, so it's B4 times B22, which matches up with the expense of salary, because that is in our what if assumptions. We are going to have to press that F4 key to get the absolute cell reference to B22. You can press your down arrow key. Whoops, no, we can't. We got to press the enter button. Then we'll go to B11 equals B4 times B23, F4, press your enter key. Marketing is equal B4 times B24, press your F4 key. Miscellaneous equals B4 times B25, B23, B24, B25. Okay. All right. So, now if you have numbers in your textbook, you might want to go back and compare those. Right, now we need to do a sum of our total expenses here. So while we're in B14, you can just come up here, and if you do a double click on the auto sum, it's going to automatically add up B9 through B13. B9 through B13, that is what we want to add up. And so our number here for total expenses is the sum of B9 through B13. Then we'll go down to B16. So this is our operating income. Our operating income is found by taking our gross margin and subtracting our total expenses. So again, just like the subtraction I was talking to you about earlier, if you write it out in paper like you did in elementary school, it would be $1,194,781.25 minus $57,000 whatever. Okay? So then just put your cell references with that. It would be B6 minus B14. Don't necessarily worry about how they word it. Just do what's logical to you to subtract. So equals B6 minus our total expenses. Now, the next thing that they show you in your textbook is how to view all of these formulas that we've just put in. And you can do that by pressing your control key and what's called the accent mark. It is located to the left of the number 1 above the tab key. So control and the accent mark shows you what's called the formulas version of your worksheet. So you'll see up here my cost of goods sold is whatever's up in B4 times what I have down here in B19. Then I do a subtraction. My if statement listed there, I can look at all the different parts of that. So your formulas version is kind of handy if you have a problem with your spreadsheet and it's not looking exactly right. You and your buddies can look at the formulas version and see if you can find where there might be a mistake in a formula that's been put in. To change it back from formulas version to what we call the values version, you'll do the same thing. Control the accent mark, and it comes back to the normal view that we had. Now, I will tell you, if you notice when we went into the formulas version, the columns got really wide. If you adjust those columns to make them smaller, when you come back to the values version, the columns will be even smaller because you adjusted them in the other version, and you may not be able to see all of your work. Now, because we have an absolute cell reference in all of this stuff, as we move it across from column B to C to D to E to F, those numbers should, or those formulas are always going to refer back to that specific cell down here in our assumptions area. So we are going to select B5 down through our operating income, which is B16. And we are going to take our fill handle and drag it over to G16. So get your little black plus sign on that little green square. And we'll go over to G16. We'll release our mouse and you'll see all the information is put in there for us. Alright, so if you have your textbook, you can check your numbers there. The one that's on my screen here is really tiny. I can't read it. So they show us how to determine non-adjacent row titles or row totals. I believe we've done this before. But let me scooch back over here. And so we want to figure out our totals for each of these rows. So they have us select H5 and 6, and then hold your control key down and select that next range there of all of our expenses. Let go of your mouse, and then go to your operating income. Hold your control key down and click on your operating income. So you have all of those different areas selected, and then we're just going to click the auto sum button. It's going to add all of those up for us. And we're getting to the part where we can format this and make it look nice so we can read it. in your textbook, the next section talks about nested forms of the if function. This is something for those of you that are going to be working with Excel to kind of have as a plant in the back of your head of, oh yeah, I could do this. So with a nested if function, the example that they give you here is the sales revenue greater than 1,250,000? That's the exact same thing that we had. If it's yes, then they do get a bonus. If it's no, they get a 0 for their bonus. However, a nested function goes on to say, yes, the revenue was greater. So then the next question is, was the sales revenue greater than or equal to 1.45? If that answer is no, then they only get the $5,000 bonus. If it is greater than or equal to the 1.45, then they get a higher bonus of 7,500. So that is just a small example of doing a nested if function. You probably won't see any questions over that as you go through the rest of this. Okay, so the next part is adding a Sparkline chart. A Sparkline chart is just a very quick glance at how things are changing from month to month in this case. So we want to be able to see column B and column I at the same time, and we need to be able to see row 3. So we could do some moving around, because I don't need to see column A right now. I just need to see B, 3 through, and I, column I. Right. So if I go to I4, this is where I can put my first Sparkline in. What we're going to do here is this chart is going to tell us what is our trend from January through June. So we can see, does it go up, down, does it stay the same? So it's just going to be a small little chart for those 6 months. So while we're in I4, we'll come up to our Insert tab. And then in our Sparklines section, we are going to click on the line. And then we are going to be asked, what is the range of data that you want us to use? Well, we don't want them to use totals in column H. So we only want to use B4 through G4. So that's going to be the data range. And then the location where we want this is going to be I4. And so we put in our Sparkline chart for that first row. All right, we are going to make some changes to our Sparkline chart. This is a line chart, and right now it has the blue Sparkline style dark number 5. We want to change that to blue Sparkline style accent 1. So I'm going to go over here to this first column. So accent 1, lighter 40%. So see, I'm still in the dark section. So I have to click on this. And then got to find my, okay. This, I think, is what I want. Blue Sparkline style, accent one, lighter 40%. I probably wouldn't have ever found that. I just looked at the picture in the book to see where I need to be clicking. So now I've changed it from whatever it was, dark, to this one. So now I can use, now that I have this set and formatted the way I want it, I'm going to use my fill handle from I4, and I'm going to drag all the way down through I16. Now, the rows that don't have any data on them, they're not going to have a chart on them either. So we don't have to worry about those too much. You can change the type of the Sparkline. Since I'm still in column I and those cells are selected or are highlighted, I'm still in the Sparkline Tools design. I can come over here and change it from lines to columns so that you can kind of see how it changes from month to month based on a column reading. All right, so let's save this. If you haven't done so far in a little while, it might be a good idea. Then we go into doing formatting for our spreadsheet. So we're going to select non-adjacent ranges, and then we're going to apply formatting to those specific ranges. So we are going to select B4 through H4. We've done this before. B4 through H4. We're going to hold down our control key. Now, I'm just going to tell you this right now. If you struggle holding down the control key and getting the rest of these all done at the same time, don't worry about that. What you can do is go ahead. They have us on the Home tab in the number group. Going into the dialog box launcher. And we want to make sure that we're in the currency category. We want our decimal places to be 2. We want our symbol to be the $sign. And we want the red font color let's try that again. Currency, 2 decimals, the red $sign, or the red negative numbers with parentheses. All right, so then we can click the OK button here. And then you can go back and do the rest of these. Or you can set the first one that way. You can come up, double click your format painter, and then you need to apply those to B9 through H9, B14, B9, I'm sorry, B14 through H14, and then B16 through H16. Okay, so now we're ready to go into P5. Oops, I gotta turn my format painter off. Alright, so we're going to go B5 through H5. B10. Oops, we gotta hold our control key down. B10 through H13. Sorry guys, I don't have my regular mouse working with this. So then I want H through H13. And then on the number group, I'm going to click on the drop down dialog box, or the dialog box launcher, and then I'm going to click on the number, make sure the number tab is selected. Okay, so, get back to this here. I did that. Okay. B5 to H5. B10 to H13. Okay, that's what I did. Okay, so we're going to click the currency, and then we want 2 decimal places. We do not want a symbol, so we'll just change that to none. And then we want to keep the red dollar sign, or the red negative numbers with the parentheses around them. Then we'll click the OK button here. Okay, so I can see that I missed this row somewhere along the way. So it should also be formatted with that currency style. This one will have the dollar signs because it is the last in a section, the last row in a section. So I will get that fixed. Oh, it's probably supposed to have, sorry. Probably didn't fix all this currency to dollar sign, and then this needs to be red negative numbers in parentheses. Okay. Our next part is to format our worksheet titles. So they have you just do Control Home, which takes you to the very beginning of the document, which is where you want to be A1. So while we're in A1, we're going to go to the column heading. We're going to click on the column A heading to select all of column A. And we're going to click B to make that bold. And we'll go to A1. We're going to increase our font size to 28. We'll go to A2, and we're going to change that to 16 point. Alright, so now we're going to select A1 through I2. We're not going to be able to do that margin center like we've done before. So we want to use our fill, which is our paint can spilling out. And we are going to use the dark blue text 2, and then we're going to do lighter 80%. So we have A1 through I2 selected, and we're going to change the font to the dark blue accent 1. The next thing we're going to format is the range A3 through I3. Now, a lot of people think they don't need to select A3 because there's not anything in that cell to format. But we do need to select this because part of the formatting is an underline, and it's going to look funny if it doesn't underline. It doesn't put that underline all the way across this bottom of this row. So we're going to select A3 through I3, and we'll come up here to our cell styles, and we're going to use heading 3. Now we're going to go to A6 through H6. We can hold down our control key. We're going to get 14. Sorry guys, I'm not very good at this mouse. And then row 16 also, operating income. And so we have those 3 selected. We're going to come up to this cell styles, and we're going to choose the total cell style. And then we'll go back to A4. So that's where our revenue is. And we want to use the fill that we used previously up here in rows 1 and 2. So we'll go to A4. Oops. It edited. Then Just go up to your fill color with that paint can there. Just click it because it's going to be the same color that we just used. And while that row is still selected, we're going to change the font color to also the dark blue accent one. Now we're going to use the format painter to take this formatting, the light blue fill color with the dark blue text, and we're going to use that format painter to paint that format in other locations on our worksheet. So make sure A4 is what is the selected cell. And then we'll come up here to our home ribbon. And in the clipboard section, there's that little paintbrush. You're going to double click it. Double clicking allows you to paint in more than one location. We're going to go to A6. And then we're going to go to A16. I'm sorry. Yeah, A16 to H16. Then we can click our format painter button to turn it off, or you can press your escape key to turn it off. Then we're going to go to B16 through H16 because we lost our currency style there. They ask us to apply the floating $sign with 2 decimal places. So hopefully you know that that is the currency style. Okay. Remember, the floating $signs are one's going to be right next door, or right next to the number that it's representing, where the fixed $sign is always going to be at the far left edge of a cell. All right, we're going to go down to the what if assumptions section. We're going to go to A18, and they have us change this font size to 9. We're also going to italicize and underline. So now that cell has bold, italic, and underline. We're going to go to A19 and select the range down through B25. So that's that whole little table there. And they ask us to change that font size down to 9 as well. Then we're going to come up to A18, and we're going to select all of this down through B25, and we're going to use that light blue fill color, and we're going to use the dark blue font. Go ahead and save at this point in time.